Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's Partner Infopedia Media Web Conference, U.S. Azure Partner Community Call for June. Today's session is being recorded on behalf of the Microsoft Corporation. If you do not consent to being part of the recorded session, please disconnect your line at this time. Attendees may access the web conference recording via a link that will be delivered within 72 hours post-conference. To learn more about the ways you can participate in today's event, please click on the Messages button in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. We encourage you to use the Messages panel at any time to ask questions regarding content or to request support. To do so, please click on the Messages button at the bottom of your screen, type your question into the white text box, and simply click Send. Your question will appear under Comment Pending until someone responds. If you experience any technical difficulties during today's web conference, please press F5 to refresh your console or download the video troubleshooting PDF by clicking on the download button on the bottom left of your console. And if you're still having issues, please send a message and I'll be happy to help you resolve the issue. Today you will be asked to respond to survey questions. Let me go ahead and put up our first question. Microsoft employees, what is your job role? And the survey should appear on the left-hand side of your screen. Please select the appropriate response and click Submit. And now for partners, what is your job role? Thank you. I see your responses coming in. And our final question. Partners, please rate your level of experience with Azure. Thank you for your patience during these announcements. One moment, please, while I start the recording. Welcome to today's web conference, U.S. Azure Partner Community Call for June. I'd like to turn it over to your first presenter, Nick Johnson, National PTS for Microsoft. Nick, you now have the floor.
Well, thank you, Kim, and good morning and good afternoon, everyone, from wherever you happen to be joining us. We appreciate you carving out an hour of your time to spend it with us today. We've got a pretty action-packed call, and so we're going to jump right in. And as we go through the call, if you have any questions, like Kim said, feel free to type them into the Q&A pane. We'll either answer those directly or we'll talk about them on the phone line. So feel free to do that. Here's just a quick agenda for today. We're going to take a look at some of the things related to Azure that have been announced in the last couple of months at our Build conference, at our Ignite conference. If you followed either of those events or happened to attend one, you know there's just a ton of new things that are coming out in Azure. We went through and sort of filtered through what we think are some of the best, especially as it relates to you as partners and your business. And so we want to give you a view into what those are and start laying the groundwork for a lot of the things we're going to talk about in the months to come. So we're going to jump into that. We're also going to look at some of the Azure readiness things that are available out there. We get asked quite a bit. What are the readiness resources? How can I help my team build a plan? And what can I do to really get through? Again, there's a ton of things out there. What can I use to get through that sort of pile of information to the really good stuff? And so we're going to show you some tools and some resources that'll help you do that as well. Before we begin, just a reminder that we are now less than a month away from the Worldwide Partner Conference. If you haven't signed up yet, there's still time, there's still room, but we are getting very close to being able to, or getting close to having that event, and we don't want you to miss it. So please sign up and join us there. It's an awesome opportunity to hear from Microsoft's leadership, from various executives to product group leaders to people that are sort of shaping the partner experience. And we want you to be able to be there and hear from those folks as well. So don't miss that opportunity. And for this community, we are actually going to have opportunities to meet at Worldwide Partner Conference. We're going to have some meetup times in the expo, and if you've been to the conference before, you know what the expo is. It's fantastic. If this will be your first time, you'll learn what it is on the first day there. So in the expo, there will be a U.S. lounge for United States partners, and we will have some dedicated times there. We haven't announced those yet, so the two ways you can sort of keep track of when those are. First is follow the @WPCUS feed on Twitter, and we will be having live tweets and updates throughout the conference while we're live in Florida. And so we'll announce times via that, and then we'll also try to get those posted on our Yammer site on the Azure community. So if you want to meet us, we'd love to meet you and just talk about anything related to Azure. We'll make sure we have some times available to do that. Just a reminder, if you're new to the community or if you've got team members who are new to Azure, there are some resources available out there for you. We've got a newsletter, we've got a Yammer site, we've got a blog, and you can see the quick links to all those things. And then we do this monthly call. This is the last monthly call in the fiscal year for Microsoft this year. Most of you probably know our fiscal year ends at the end of the month. So we'll be kicking off a new series next year starting in August. So we're going to take a break for July while we're at WPC, and then we'll start again in August. So be looking for announcements on how to get your teams and yourself signed up for that. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Jonathan Gardner. Jonathan is our national PTS who spends quite a bit of time looking at the data platform side of Azure. So Jonathan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nick. So like Nick mentioned, I spend a lot of time talking with some of our partners about data platforms. And what I mean by data platforms is really the Azure side of the data platform equation. We've had some really interesting things come out when we look at what's come out in Build and Ignite. And the first one of those that I want to kind of talk about is Apache Storm. For those of you not familiar with Apache Storm, or actually a step back from that, is if you haven't seen our embracement of the open source community, you certainly are starting to see that come through the Azure platform almost like nowhere else in our organization, and Apache Storm is one of those. Storm is really a tool that's used for real-time analytics, and it's very popular in the Internet of Things space. And so we've GA'd that on HD Insights. So HD Insights are our Hadoop distribution that's built in as platform as a service into the Azure platform. You can go launch that, like you can see on the screen here. It's now built in. So if you go to add a new service in Azure, you can actually find that under HD Insight and do the Storm. It says preview in this image, but it's actually GA. So the real neat thing about Storm is it's really designed for highly reliable cloud scale. Internet of Things is certainly a great tool in a way that we use that. Some of the other ways that we've seen partners using the Storm platform built into HD Insight are really things around social analytics, network monitoring, mobile engagement, and social, and even fraud detection. So we've had some really interesting projects happen there. I highly encourage you guys to check that out. As with many of our other tools built into the Visual Studio Suite, the Apache Storm is no different. So you can actually go work right inside the tools you're familiar with to work with Apache Storm. The next are really some enhancements around Azure SQL. As we come closer and closer to feature parity with the on-prem version of SQL Server, we brought some things forward that are really designed to help with compliance and usability, some things that have been really asked for by our customers on the platform. And the first two are certainly those. The transparent data encryption, so encrypting data at rest helps a lot when it comes to being able to pass audits and wanting to push that audit functionality off onto a platform as a service provider, and then the full text search. So a lot of capabilities there. Seen a lot of people using that around the web applications that get built and hosted on Azure. One of the drawbacks, or one of the things that people were having to use IaaS 4 was for the full stack search capability. Now that's in the platform as a service model as well. The last piece really that's very interesting is the elastic database scaling that we're seeing when it comes to Azure. And what that allows us to do is really have some incredible scale, removing the limits to what we're seeing in the platform as a service space for Azure. It really streamlines the scaling of applications, and really we see a lot of this for things like high volume OLTP databases, multi-tenant systems, continuous data collection, where you want to actually shard horizontally, or you need to scale an actual database up or down. So you can manage that functionality all through the platform as a service function. So some really neat things happening there. Certainly, a lot of people saw the release and the announcement of Data Lake, and I won't get into the very weedy details of what came out, but it really provides us with a place to store data on a file system that can be used by HD Insight, it can be used by Cloudera, it can be used by Revolution Analytics. And it's not just for storing those files, but you can actually store things in the data lake without having to have an active instance of HD Insight. So you can use Internet of Things to store files and then process those in an automated fashion on a later date, providing some really flexible scale options. So it's really meant for a place that you would store data before you actually put it into a semi-structured or structured data warehouse, allowing you to a place to store all of this information in one location. So pretty exciting stuff there. And speaking of data warehouses, the last thing I'm going to touch on before I hand it off to Nick is the Azure SQL Data Warehouse. So many people are using the SQL Warehouse functionality in SQL Server on-prem. One of the challenges has been scale, and certainly that has been addressed, where you can go to petabyte scale and you can actually scale up or down in seconds and minutes instead of hours and days. So certainly some really great functionality there, allowing you to take the data warehouse capability to a whole new level. And then the third bullet on that screen is the hybrid capability, which really can be a game changer if you're looking to expand a data warehouse that you already have on-prem. You don't want to move that completely to the cloud. You can actually create a hybrid scenario where you connect your current data warehouse with Azure SQL Data Warehouse to expand that capability into the cloud. And then the final piece is, as with all of our SQL tools, you have the ability to use tools you're already familiar with to query across multiple data types, structured and unstructured data. So some really interesting things coming out in the SQL space and the data platform space. Really looking forward to playing with all this stuff as we start working with projects and partners who are helping customers get on these platforms. So that's what I've got. I'm going to turn that over to Nick for the infrastructure piece.
Great. Thanks, Jonathan. And I would point out, too, Jonathan did a great job writing a blog that just went up last week out on the blog site I showed earlier. And it's got a lot more details about all these features, including he embedded some videos from the various conferences that have some deep dives into these features. So if anything he said sort of caught your eye, there's an option out there to go and take a look at more information. So thanks for doing that, Jonathan. Mm-hmm. All right. So, yeah, let's take a look at some of the infrastructure pieces. So the first thing, and this is huge for partners, guys, I'm just so excited about the opportunities that this is going to create for you. So if you haven't heard of it yet, Microsoft Operations Management Suite was announced and is actually available today for you to go out and start setting up and trying. And the Operations Management Suite is really designed to help you bring a holistic view into your customers' environments. And you can connect the OMS into Azure, into Amazon, and into any type of an on-premise private cloud to really start to take a look at what is going on in those environments. What's the health of things? Are servers updated? Are they patched? You can check security settings. You can monitor security through it. There's a lot that you can do. So let me jump to the next slide, and I'm actually going to show you. Here's just a screenshot of the dashboard. So this is a web-based application. It's a customizable dashboard that you can use to go in and actually, set up a lot of the things I talked about. So there's log analytics. So if you're pulling system logs off different servers, off different configurations, you can monitor those, you can do analytics on those, you can monitor availability of things. There's automation options. As I mentioned, there's security options, and this is sort of an extension of System Center, so it's not going to replace System Center. The configuration manager piece, you can connect this into it though, so it's really going to give sort of a full hybrid kind of management experience across an on-premise data center, cloud infrastructure, all those different pieces. And as I mentioned, it's fully hybrid. So it's going to connect to on-premise, cloud, and it's fully open. So it's going to connect not only to Windows machines, but to Linux machines, and it's going to connect on Amazon, it's going to connect on Azure, it's going to connect to an on-premise environment, Hyper-V, VMware, physical servers, pretty much anything you want to see that's going on there. So, there was a question, is it going to replace Configuration Manager? No, it's going to be an extension of it that's going to be able to allow you to connect those two together. So, good question there. So just really, really excited about what this is going to do. It's super simple to set up. You can onboard it in minutes. We had a partner who went through with a customer, and they had one of these sort of distributed environments, and they started setting this up, and literally within about 30 minutes, they had connected multiple different environments and different systems, and actually had gone through and started to have real usable data visible on the dashboard that was giving them information. And at one point they had 95 servers all connected, and they were able to quickly drill in and say, oh, we've got 3 servers that aren't patched correctly, or we're getting a virus alert on one server. And that was all in one place, and it was something that they hadn't really ever done before. And then I talked about the integration and the open connectivity, and as I mentioned, it's going to complement System Center. It's not going to replace it at this point, so it's going to be something that goes together with that. So. And then I talked a little bit about these, the log analytics and the automation, availability, and security. And just like Jonathan did, writing a blog to cover all the topics he did, I did the same thing. And actually in my blog, I linked a video with a fold-on demo of OMS that came from the Ignite conference. So I encourage you to go and check that out. I didn't want to take up the whole hour today just doing that. We are going to spend some time on OMS in one of the coming months, where we will do a deeper dive on it for the community. So if that's something that interests you, be on the lookout for that, but that is coming later. Some of the other announcements that came out in the infrastructure piece, first is the Azure Stack, and if you've not heard of this term yet, you will. Azure Stack is going to enable you to take the entire sort of power and fabric of Azure and apply it to running in your data center. So it's actually going to be a private version basically of Azure. This is not out today. I want to make that clear. It's not available yet today. It's going to go into preview here very soon, and then GA will be obviously a season after that, depending on everything we find during the preview process and making sure that it's ready to go to everyone. So, but the Azure Stack is really going to help for those customers who they've got such scenarios where they love the power of Azure. They love the thought of having people being able to log in, spin up a VM, create a website, do all those things. But for compliance reasons or company policy, they're not able to actually do that on a public cloud. This is going to allow them to harness the power of public cloud technology, but run it on a private infrastructure piece. And it's fantastic. So similar to the OMS, I've got a video out there that shows some of the highlights of Azure Stack. Strongly encourage you to go spend a few minutes with that. And if you have a customer that would just be a fantastic sort of trial for this, that's willing to go in and be in the early previews, reach out to us, let us know. We can't promise that we can get them into that, but we can certainly get you in contact with the people running those programs and explore that option. The next thing I want to talk about is Azure Resource Manager. This is a thing that I think for partners is going to be absolutely a game changer. Because what it's going to do, it allows you to take and start to build templates for entire deployments. So instead of just building a copy of one virtual machine, it's going to allow you to actually go out and do a series of templates. So think, for example, a front-end server and a SQL server. And if you have some IP that you are consistently deploying, the Azure Resource Manager is going to allow you to do that in a template format. and to do it very quickly and do it in a repeatable manner so you can deploy things on a regular basis. So really gonna open up options, especially if you have, like I said, repeatable IP that you're deploying at multiple customers, or if they've got repeatable scenarios where they're constantly deploying some sort of a customized test environment for testing new bits or new builds. There's definitely options that are going to get lit up with Resource Manager that haven't been there before. And then right after that is premium storage. So we've talked about this before. It's in general availability now. It's been in preview for several months, but premium storage allows you to attach high-performance disks to the virtual machines. You can do up to 32 terabytes worth of storage onto each virtual machine. And right now we're achieving about 64,000 IOPS per second on those storage configurations. So really good in the high performance, high compute, high power area. So if you've got customers that have large data sets that need to do processing or very fast I/O operations for a SQL server or something like that, check out the premium storage. It's a great option. It is now in general availability. And then you can see there's a note on the VM disk encryption for Windows and for Linux. So this is a new capability, and it's going to let you encrypt all your virtual machine disks, including the boot and the data disks. And it like I said, it's going to work with Linux and Windows. So, and it's going to be integrated into the Azure Key Vault service is how we're going to manage the keys for that. So, it's really going to help with sort of enabling data protection at a new level in Azure that some customers require, again, based on business policy or industry certifications and that type of thing. And then the last thing on this slide is VM scale sets. And scale sets are going to allow you to basically do set-based operations to do things like, create, delete, update, whatever, on a group of identical virtual machines. So essentially you can group, say you have 1,000 virtual machines, you can put them all together, and you can actually use that to scale, and you can do scale operations on those. So if you want to auto-scale them all up to a new size because you need to grow capacity, or you want to drop them back down, you can do that. It can also help with sort of image patching across VMs. It's really sort of designed around hyperscale services for big compute, big data, containerized workloads, things like that. So if you've got people that need to do large sort of homogeneous sets of virtual machines and control those all at once, VM scale sets is going to enable that for you. So spend some time looking at that, and if you have customers that would fit that, please encourage them to take a look at it. The other piece of sort of the infrastructure flips over to the networking side, and we had several key new announcements come out of the conference on this area as well. One is user-defined routing. It used to be that Azure sort of managed all that for you, but you're actually now going to be able to do user-defined routing. So you can do custom routing within the virtual networks to control traffic flow within Azure. And there's a lot of technical behind that, and we're not going to spend a lot of time on that today. But if you have customers that are sort of very prescriptive about how they want their networking traffic to flow, this is going to enable that. We also announced recently that we're going to set up a bunch of new virtual network appliance options within Azure, and some of these include, I think there's some Cisco, some Barracuda, Checkpoint, WebSense, Palo Alto, F5, Alert Logic. I might be missing one or two there, but there's quite a few new virtual network appliances that are coming. So I would encourage you to check that out if you have that as a requirement. And then in public preview, we announced Azure DNS, and it is what it sounds like. It is a DNS service where you can actually use Azure as to host your as a name server in your DNS setup. So if you're interested in that. And then there's ExpressRoute. Hopefully you know what this is, but ExpressRoute allows you to do high-speed site-to-site connection that's dedicated between a customer and a network provider for high-speed access into Azure. Until now, you haven't been able to have both a dedicated circuit and a site-to-site VPN on the same account, on the same subscription to the same VNet. You're now going to be able to do that. So if there's a requirement for that, that's an option. And then the last one is you can now do multiple virtual IPs per cloud service. So if you're doing cloud services and you've got a bunch of virtual machines, you know that the virtual IP on a cloud service is what points out to the world and allows the world, if necessary, to have incoming traffic to that cloud service and to the resources that lie within it. Up until now, you've only had one virtual IP for that. Now you can actually have more than one. So if you need to have something hard-coded or you want to have one thing dedicated for one app and a different IP, that now. So that's a brand new feature. We're really excited about that one as well. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Frank. And Frank is our PTS who focuses quite a bit of time on the platform and developer space. Frank?
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. So let me talk a little bit about some of the kind of the key announcements and things that are going around the app dev space for our SI partners. So one of the interesting things right now is it's actually a really great time to be an app developer in the industry as well as working with Microsoft. And no matter what language you want to use, what framework you want to use, the type of application, whether it's a native application or a web-based application, what OSs you want to write to, whether you want to use things like iOS, Android, the Windows platform, take advantage of some of the newest industry trends out there or patterns, architectural patterns. The good news is Microsoft continues to build the Azure platform to support all of these things, right? We've become a very open platform. We really want to allow app developers to build apps the way they want to build them, and then we will continue to support you. So on this slide here, one of the things I kind of wanted to talk about or represent is when you think of the Azure platform, we give you a lot of options, but at the same time, those options can be confusing as an application development partner. So if you kind of look at this diagram here, you'll see that slanted line. You can almost think of that slanted line as the continuum from being an infrastructure as a service to the platform as a service, where the top end side of that slide, of that line, is pure infrastructure service, where you see virtual machines sitting, and then at the bottom is platform as a service. And there's really this blurring of services that continue to get built on top of Azure that almost make platform as a service easier and easier, or the levels of abstraction that you want to be able to deal with. So again, taking a look at this diagram, you'll see that from a y-axis perspective, we kind of talked about the degree of how customizable the OS and the platform you can do to make changes to. And then along the x-axis, we talk about how fast you can kind of do your development, send it out to your customers, and ease of maintenance. So when you think of infrastructure as a service and platform as a service, that line kind of goes from top left to bottom right. And one of the newest things that we kind of announced right now is we've packaged up a number of some of our old existing services. So we used to have what we called websites and mobile services, and we've kind of changed that name and created 4 new categories of platform as a service apps. They're called web apps, API apps, mobile apps, and logic apps. We've wrapped them in this container called the app service. And this was something that we just released. We announced it, I think, a week or so before the Build conference. And I just want to give you if you're not familiar with it, just give you a little insight into kind of what it is. So like I said, the app service is one integrated offering that supports 4 different types of applications. There's web apps, which you can think of as kind of your traditional website. If you're an application development partner that builds website, web apps is the place to go. And we'll talk about that in a second, kind of more of the details about that. There's also this concept of mobile apps. And when you think of mobile apps, think of, I want to write native applications for, like I said, iOS, Android, Windows Phone. Think of mobile apps as this common back end that can be built in Azure to support all of those different platforms and actually allow you to support all of those platforms simultaneously with one back end. Then there's this concept of API apps. And what API apps are is kind of an industry pattern that's been going around for a long time, is writing RESTful-based applications, right? So one of the things that Microsoft has done is made kind of API apps a first-class citizen, and they've made it easy for you to now expose your systems through the concept of an API, as well as the ability to consume other software as a service API apps. And again, we'll talk more about that in a second. And then finally, the concept of logic apps, which you can almost think of it as the glue. It's a kind of a visual development environment where you can kind of string together all of these API apps, do a little bit of business orchestration, and tie those things together. And again, I'll show you that in a second here. So web apps, again, this is probably the most, if you have been working with the Azure platform, this is probably something that you're the most familiar with. It was formerly called websites. And like I said, it allows you to take almost any website that you've built in Visual Studio and move it to the cloud in a very easy fashion, whether it's, .NET, Java, PHP, or Python. We support that. You can deploy these applications through a number of different mechanisms, whether it be directly through web deploy and Visual Studio. We support a number of online source control systems, whether it be Visual Studio Online or Git. And we also, if you're kind of old school and you still just deploy websites via files, we support things like FTP sites. So again, think of web apps at a high level as just the ability to take an existing web application, move it to the cloud in a very easy way. Mobile apps, like I said, think of it again as the common back end to your various client platforms. And we support things like push notifications and like I said, tying all that data into one place. API apps, again, I kind of talked about this. It's the RESTful-based APIs. I'll skip through this slide, but say, when we built API apps, we actually worked with a ton of providers out there. So if you can see, we have API apps for all of the popular SaaS applications that are out there. So if you want to interact with Box or interact with Twitter or Salesforce, there's an API app out there that you can kind of just plug into your environment and create automation calls in between your application and these third-party applications. And logic apps, again, we said this is kind of that glue that ties everything together. The interesting thing about logic apps is that I think they were formerly based on some of the ideas behind BizTalk services, but from a application development partner perspective, the interesting thing about this is the one category of apps within App Service that doesn't actually require you to code. It's a completely visual environment. You can drag and drop components. So it's something that almost a business analyst can do, or you think of it as a business process. If you have business processes that you build for your clients that tend to change a lot or need to be tweaked a lot, instead of building it directly into the code, you can build it into a logic app and make it a lot easier to kind of maintain and change. And I think the next slide here I have just gives a little view of what these connectors look like. So when you pull it up in Azure, you can drop these connectors onto the platform. What it will show you is the types of things you can do with that connector. So for example, with the Twitter connector, you can tweet a text, retweet count, tweeted by, and then tie these things together. So that was the announcement that happened right before build. And again, like Nick and Jonathan, I will have a blog. The blog post is not live yet, but I think in the next day or so, I will have a blog post out there that kind of goes through more of these details, and again has a lot of links to the build and ignite videos that kind of talk about some of this stuff. So beyond the app service, one of the things that was announced at the build conference is what we call app service environments, and this is something that's in preview. And the big distinguishing point between the app service environment is the app service today, when you think about it, is a multi-tenant environment. When you build any of those apps in Azure, it kind of sits in this multi-tenant world. And what the app service environment is kind of addressing customer or enterprise needs where they want to take their line of business applications, move them to the cloud, but they don't really want to run them in a true multi-tenant environment. They really want to run them on dedicated hardware, dedicated compute resources. So what the app service environment does is allows you to spin up any one of the app service apps, whether it be web apps, mobile apps, logic apps, and put them on their own compute resources, as well as it automatically directly connects to a virtual network. So again, it's really been built for enterprises. So these app service apps can now talk to other services within Azure very easily. Like, so for example, if you have a virtual machine that's containing more of another piece of your line of business app or something like that, makes it very easy to tie these things together. So that's something that you should definitely look at if you have enterprise customers that are thinking about moving to the cloud, but haven't quite, maybe they have requirements or compliance requirements where they really don't want to be in this true multi-tenant environment and they want to run on dedicated resources, this is something that you should take a look at. We also announced the Visual Studio Application Insights, and when you think about Application Insights, it's really we've provided a great mechanism around any application that you put into our web apps service, the ability to kind of get all this telemetry information, whether it be number of hits to a page, time between pages, performance information, timing, really detailed analytics around how the website is being used. You may want to take a look at this Application Insights functionality. And finally, the last piece I was going to kind of cover on is something else that we rolled out at the Build conference, is what we call the Azure Service Fabric. Oops, I just went ahead. And what you can think of is, as Microsoft as Microsoft built out Azure, we built out a number of our own services, right? So whether it be the Azure database, and this thing does not want to stay on the same page, so we'll see. Whether we built out Azure database, storage, networking, all of the individual services that we built out on top of Azure, one of the things we realized when we built them is that we needed to create services that were highly scalable and that were reliable and that could be partitioned and things like that. So one of the things that Microsoft did is we built a set of technologies known as the Microsoft Azure Service Fabric. And what the Service Fabric really does is, like I said, it's a set of technologies that run on top of that a lot of the services within Azure have been built on. So, like I mentioned, Azure Database, even services like Cortana and Intune have been built on top of this. So, take a look at this, and I think it's an interesting thing, and it's something that I think is worth taking a look at. And with that said, I'm going to turn it over to the next speaker.
Thank you, Frank. Actually, a couple questions came into the chat window for you.
Okay.
And so if you know these real quickly, we can shout them out here. If not, we can follow up offline. But the Azure IoT Kit, have you heard anything about when that might be coming out and available for partners to start using?
I have not. That's something I'd have to follow up on.
Okay. Yeah, we can take a note. Maybe we can follow up on that. We'll maybe post a note out on Yammer after the call, and we'll follow up on that. And then on your previous slide with the ASE, how is isolation achieved there? And we might need a little more clarification on that question if that doesn't.
Meaning, yeah, I'll probably have to follow up on that and get exact details of the exact isolation. I believe you're getting dedicated hardware, but we probably need to follow up on that.
Okay, perfect. So we'll take a note, and then we can follow up on that afterwards. So thank you, and just a reminder, if you guys have any more questions too, you can continue to submit those through there. Last thing we wanted to cover off on today is something we get a lot of questions on, and so I hope this is something that would be useful to you, but we want to take a look at some of the resources and tools available to do readiness planning. We often hear from practice leads or sort of SMEs in an area saying, I need to now help other people in my organization build a readiness plan on Azure, and I don't even know where to start. Or I went out and searched online and I pulled up my favorite search engine, hopefully it was Bing, but I pulled up my favorite search engine and I found just a ton of materials. What's useful? What's good? And so what I wanted to do was spend just a couple of minutes pointing out some resources. I'm actually going to switch over and go to a live demo here because it's more fun to see things than to just talk about them. So let me flip up to the demo screen here. One moment. All right. There we go. So as the screen is building, what I want to do is sort of challenge you to think about as you build a readiness plan. The first thing people will often tell me is, I need to have people learn Azure. And the thought there is, the intent is great, right? We need to build up as much Azure skill as possible. But what I encourage people to do is take that to the next level and start to focus on what part of Azure do they need to learn. And it's really the parts that are going to support whatever practice you're trying to build, whether it's a disaster recovery practice or a big data practice or a developer practice. sending someone in just to learn Azure because it's such a big platform can be kind of an overwhelming thing. And so first step is encourage them to kind of narrow their focus a little bit. Maybe they need to get good at networking or virtual machines. You pick the topic, then you can start really building a plan around that. And honestly, the first place I recommend you visit is what we call the Azure Partner Readiness Catalog. And I'll put a link to this in the chat window here when I'm done, so you can go straight to this. It'll also be in our follow-up post on Yammer. But the Azure Partner Readiness Catalog was done in collaboration with some of our folks who work on Azure worldwide, as well as some of the folks on this team. And it is a curated list of what we sort of have found to be the best of the best materials. And so whenever we run across something, whether it's a blog post or a video or a case study, we're going to go ahead and put it into this tool. And this is fully available for partners today. It's super easy to use. You come in here, you can type in a search query, or you can come in and say, I just want to see blogs, because I really like reading blogs that are at a 200 level, and I want to see the ones that are in English, and I don't care where they come from, and let's say I'm really just interested in learning about Azure Active Directory. And all of a sudden it's now filtered me down to 2 blogs that we have found that are really good and really helpful for you as partners. This is great. What you can actually do is you can save this query. So if you go up to your address bar on your browser and you save that query, that'll actually bring you back to this exact same results page every single time. So if you want to kind of copy and paste a few of those into a readiness plan and say, hey, go read these 2 blogs and go watch these 3 videos, you've started now to get people directly to a screen that's very manageable, because it's not a list of hundreds or thousands of entries, but it's simply just one. So come spend some time with the Azure Partner Readiness Catalog. Some of the other resources that we often use, we have what we call the US Partner Learning Blog. This is an updated blog every single month that comes out, and it's got upcoming events. It's got upcoming conference calls, web calls, training events, you name it, it's on here. So if you don't get this in your email every month, you can subscribe to it. So we'll post the link to that. One of the questions we get a lot of is preparing specifically for Azure certifications. If, as a partner, you're pursuing any of the cloud competencies from the Microsoft Partner Network, Azure certifications are a part of that. And so we actually went through, and based on feedback from a lot of people, we put together a blog that walks you through exactly how to prepare specifically for the exams. What are the best resources? What are the things that we found to be most helpful? And then some test-taking tips as well. So that's available if you've got people in your realm of influence that are actually going out and preparing for the exam. Spend some time with that blog. MSDN Channel 9. I'm sure most of you are probably familiar with this. If you're new to Azure and you haven't seen it yet, absolutely, this is a fantastic resource. You go to any browser, just type in Channel 9, and this will be the first thing that comes up. When you get out here, if you go to the Browse tab and you hit the Azure Content link, you're actually going to get straight to the page that's got regular updates about Azure. So they have sort of weekly shows that are produced from various people within Microsoft. Awesome content. A lot of them are in the 5 to 10 to 15-minute variety, so you can spend quite a bit of time with those. And then Microsoft Virtual Academy. If you haven't checked this out in a while, I strongly encourage you to go spend some time there. A lot of the things you'll find here are linked in that first thing I showed you, the Partner Readiness Catalog. So we've already taken the action on your behalf to go through and filter through some of these. But if you want to see the entire catalog, you can come straight to the Microsoft Virtual Academy. A lot of what's out here is completely free. And this is actually a brand new site that just launched and has been redesigned this week. So if you haven't spent any time here, do it. I encourage you to spend time there. You can drill right in. Here's an example, Azure for IT Pros. And it's going to take you in and get you right into information about that. Then the last piece, and I'm going to have Kim bring up the slide presentation again. And the last piece that I want to talk about is what we call Partner Technical Services. And we have a guest speaker from that organization here who's going to jump on here in a second and show us some of the resources that the Partner Technical Services organization has to offer for you. And if you're a partner and you have a gold competency or a silver competency, maybe you've seen those things called advisory hours, and you're not even sure what those are or how to use those. Well, Phil is one of the Phil is going to present here in a minute, but Phil is one of the folks who actually helps run the team that delivers and helps you use those advisory hours. So I'm going to turn it over to him and let him walk you through an explanation of what's available and how to take advantage of it. Phil?
Yeah, thank you, Nick. My name is Phil Meadows. I'm a lead partner technical consultant for Global Partner Services. So that's a whole bunch of title for basically being responsible for driving technical readiness in the partner community. And part of what we do is, as we have here in this roadmap of our services for Microsoft Azure, we have a series of courses that we maintain that are schedulable through the Partner Learning Center. You can actually go to the U.S. Partner Learning blog that Nick showed and jump on the hot sheet, and you'll see our webinars listed in the training schedule with links to those invitations. And you can go and attend training sessions on a variety of different topics. So I wanted to talk in general about our portfolio that I have here. I know this is a busy slide, but we'll allow you to download this and you can look at this at your leisure. But there are a couple sort of hero offerings, I would call them, that I want to dive into and talk about in detail. But in general, these offerings are either offered at no cost, like the Azure Starter Kit or the Modern Biz Technical Series, or there is a Partner Advisory Hour cost. Partner Advisory Hours, as Nick mentioned, are part of your benefit as a silver or gold competency partner, and you can spend those for these online courses. But also, we highly encourage, one-to-one engagement with our consultants. We have consultants that specialize in all sorts of different areas of the public and private cloud, and we can sit and really work on defining solutions, either with a customer on the line. You need some help putting together answers for RFP, all the way to you're in mid-deployment and need some advice on enabling scalability within a cloud service in Azure, or creating hybrid network connections. So it's really sort of a rounded service of partner technical consultancy that's available to you. So here we have kind of two phases. One is the activation phase, and one sort of the consumption phase, as we like to call it. So the activation pieces are really about getting started in Azure. So our core introductory offerings are labs on Azure for IaaS and for developers for PaaS. So I'll talk a little bit more about the PaaS offering, because this is something new. We typically have really worked within the infrastructure sphere, and now we're really trying to drive technical readiness and awareness in the ISV and developer community. So we have a few offerings that are targeted there, and we can talk about those. As we go through, I think one piece, Nick mentioned certification preparation. A good stepping stone into the certification process, I think, is the partner practice enablement training on Azure IaaS. It's a good 200-level overview of Azure infrastructure services, and really can start getting you ready for 5.3.3 and diving in there. But I actually, just one moment, I need to take over as presenter for a second so I can advance my slide. The first thing I wanted to talk about in terms of our kind of hero offerings is the Practice Accelerator for Microsoft Azure IaaS. So a Practice Accelerator is a distinct offering type that we offer to partners. It's an intensive 2-day deep dive into a solution area where we really try and focus on best practices, repeatable deployments, and getting a partner ready to kind of put the best infrastructure in place in a client deployment. And so a lot of this is based on knowledge that we've gleaned from MCS best practices, from case studies, and so we bring this all together into a 2-day session, about 4 hours each, and we deep dive into the core services of Azure and some of the architectural best practices and implementations. So we talk about compute network storage, and we also bring in identity and access management and security solutions to round out any infrastructure solution. And then we wrap up this training with sort of a good dive into some of the open source and partner solutions that are available for use in Azure, like Linux, SAP. This is really a good offering for high-level SIs who are jumping into scale Azure deployments and want some best practices. The second piece is actually something of a more focused scenario. It is about business continuity using Azure Site Recovery. And the reason we have a specific deep dive offering around this is it is a real hot sales scenario right now, and it's one of the primary deployments, like hybrid deployments for new customers consuming Azure services. And so we deep dive into business continuity using Azure Site Recovery, integrating either just directly with Hyper-V or with VMM. And we talk about a lot of the different topology scenarios that are there, either using ASR as an orchestration engine to fail over from a primary site to a secondary site, or directly into Azure, where virtual machines are failed over into Azure and run as Azure IaaS machines until a site can come back up. And so we kind of have a pretty broad scale of potential customers that can consume Azure Site Recovery, anywhere from an SMB that wants to protect 10 virtual machines on a single site and they can fail those over to Azure, or a large multi-data center customer who needs an orchestration engine for their business continuity and disaster recovery scenarios. So this is a good offering, and we'll be playing this out through this next quarter. You'll actually probably see a lot of announcements around the Azure Site Recovery as it becomes sort of a first-class citizen in the Azure world. Now, we talked a little bit about the developer story that we're trying to mature at Partner Services, and right now that story is it's got two chapters. So the first chapter is Labs on Azure for Developer, and this is an offering that is aimed at transitioning partners or transitioning partners or customers who are looking at moving either their own applications into the cloud or working with customers to migrate their applications to Azure. And so this is a migration scenario, and it goes over a lot of the migration decision points. First and primary, IaaS versus PaaS. Do you need a virtual machine model where you can have more direct interaction with the actual platform that's hosting those applications? Or do you need something that's scalable and elastic and you want to move to the cloud services or websites model? And so we talk about that, as well as some of the data backend migration scenarios that are going to be going to need to discuss. So either basing data in SQL Azure or actually building a SQL always-on cluster in Azure IaaS. So this is sort of a first point in our ISV discussion. But the second point is an offering that we've put together that's really about capitalizing on the new mobile-first, cloud-first world. So this is about developing highly available applications that can target any platform. So the first sort of section is a bit about that opportunity in a cloud-first, mobile-first world, how to monetize on that, and how to start building to reach across platforms and really have your services and applications consumed by anyone on any device, on any service. And so the first half of that, we actually talk about the Microsoft platform, because there's quite a bit of different technologies that you can take advantage of. Windows 8 mobile, Windows 10. We talk a little bit about the opportunity that Windows 10 is going to present. When Windows 10 launches, we'll be sort of maturing the developer vision on Windows 10, but also across the Office Store, Office 365, being able to target the breadth of the Microsoft platform. In the second part, we start talking about being able to target iOS and Android platforms in addition to Windows platforms. So there's a variety of tools out there that Microsoft has really been making strong partnerships with, integrating into Visual Studio and creating a sort of seamless experience to be able to not only target iOS and Android and Windows platforms, but also, in some cases, program once and hit all of those platforms. So we talk about Xamarin, Cordova, TypeScript, and a few other technologies that are brought into here. So I know that's a lot. Please feel free to look over the slides. Also, feel free to reach out to me for more information about any of these offerings or initiatives. Here I have our July schedule. These are hyperlinked out to the PLC registration link, so you can directly register from this slide. But we have a few offerings from our portfolio that we're delivering in July that I really like you to try out if you're in the developer sphere or within the Azure infrastructure and architecture sphere. So the PPE is always played every month, and so you can attend that to really start your first ramp on to Azure IaaS. And then we have our Solution Accelerator for Azure Site Recovery and our two developer-focused, ISV-focused offerings. So thank you so much for listening to me, and please feel free to reach out to the PTS community as well, and they can help drive you towards the kind of training that you need, and we're always willing to partner and participate. So thanks so much.
All right. Well, thank you, Phil. A couple of questions that came in there real quick. One was the Power BI, the red carpet. Can you expand on what that is a little bit?
Yeah. Let me follow up particularly on that one.
Okay. Yeah, we can post a description of some of these on our Yammer page later today.
I think that would be great.
So if you can send me that, we'll get that posted for everybody.
Yeah, the Power BI Red Carpet Series is a new initiative that's just starting to get some attention. So I'll put together a briefing that can really help introduce that.
And then there was one more question was, are there any specific offerings for seller roles that aren't so deeply technical?
So we're actually looking at expanding the Modern Biz training to have a day dedicated to seller roles, because we really find that we do a lot of technical enablement, and for sales questions and for pricing questions and for migration questions, we do one-to-one consultations, but we don't have a strict offering around that. And so the Modern Biz series actually is something that we're going to expand to really embrace that aspect of the partner ecosystem. So yeah, we'll be seeing that soon, actually.
Okay. And beyond these offerings, I know that there are some seller-specific courses that are available. If you go back to that hot sheet that I talked about earlier, there's stuff that gets posted on there every month that are more available to help the sellers out as well. So a lot there. Good. Well, we are nearing the end of our time, and so I just want to thank everybody for their time today. We're super excited about all this new stuff coming on Azure. We're going to cover a lot of this stuff in more depth topics over the next couple of months throughout the fall here. So please stay tuned. We're going to have a lot more coming for you. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to our moderator, Kim, and close out the call. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Nick. Ladies and gentlemen, we hope that you found today's information helpful. If you enjoyed today's web conference or have feedback on how we can provide you with a better event, please let us know by completing our survey. Please click on the messages button to find the link to the survey, and the survey is on a scale from 5 to 1, with 5 being the highest score possible. And customers can access the web conference recording via a link that will be delivered within 72 hours post-conference. And I'd like to extend a big thank you to all our presenters. This concludes today's web conference. You may now disconnect.